there, BookTube. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're here to talk about a few books by Caribbean authors and what reading these books will tell you about the history and culture of these Caribbean countries. In June, we're going to be celebrating Caribbean Heritage Month, and here on my channel we're going to be hosting a readathon called CaribAThon, where the focus is on reading books by Caribbean authors, but specifically I'd ask you to focus on reading books by the authors from the 13 independent Caribbean countries. However, I am not in any way trying to discourage anyone from reading books from other Caribbean countries. The main reason that I invited you to read books from these Caribbean countries was just to give you a way to focus your reading. But there are 30 days in June. The entire month is Caribbean Heritage Month. So if you would like to read a book from each Caribbean country in June, more power to you, and I'd love to hear about it in the comments. There are over 30 countries that could be considered Caribbean countries, so I'd love to hear about it if you're going to be doing something like that. And of course, we will be talking more about CaribAthon as we get a little closer to the date. It is in the middle of June, but for now we're just going to be talking about these specific 4 Caribbean books that I have read and enjoyed and wanted to share with you here as well. More videos like this will be coming soon, where I'll be recommending other books from other Caribbean authors, some from these independent Caribbean countries, some from the wider Caribbean. I'd just love for you to read Caribbean in June. Stay tuned for my discussion on these 4 books. The first book I wanted to mention was Auguston by Kai Miller, which is set in Jamaica. Kai Miller is a Jamaican author. Well, he grew up in Jamaica and now he lives in the United Kingdom. This is one of his novels. And this one is set in Jamaica. There are 2 timelines being explored in this narrative. The first storyline happens in the early 1900s when Jamaica was still under colonial rule from the United Kingdom. And the second storyline happens in the later part of the century, in the 1980s. And the comparison between the 2 storylines is that we have Black people being persecuted and oppressed by the ruling class. In the first narrative, the ruling class, of course, are whites. There is lingering racism because of the Black community being lorded over by the crown. However, in the later storyline, in the 1980s, we expect to have more equality because we have Black natives being ruled by Black government. However, there is enduring racism, enduring racial profiling, enduring oppression for Black people, except that now in the later storyline, what they're experiencing is oppression from their own people. This one speaks a lot about the race-class divide in Jamaica. Reading this one will also give you a little bit of information about how Rastafarian culture is perceived by the wider Jamaican society. I recently read this one and I just wanted to give you a little bit of a caveat in that there is some graphic language in this book. A lot of books by Jamaican authors, especially contemporary authors, do include some of the Jamaican dialect and some coarse language. So there is that little bit of a caveat if you pick this one up. The next book I wanted to mention is A House for Mr Biswas by V.S. Naipaul. And Naipaul grew up in Trinidad. He moved to the United Kingdom as a young man. He traveled the world. It seems he traveled extensively, and a lot of his writings reflect his experiences. However, he also wrote extensively about his life in Trinidad, and this is one such example. A House for Mr Biswas is set in Trinidad. We have a main character who bears a lot of the similarities to our author. Naipaul and the main character in this one, Mohun Biswas, are both men of Indian descent, in that their ancestors would have been people who came from India to the Caribbean as indentured servants. They came to work, however, they brought their culture and they brought their religion along with them. And to the extent that they lived amongst people from African background, you could say that they were now Caribbean people. However, they still maintain a lot of their Indian identity. And so in this one, we have a man of Indian descent who his family and the people around him continue to practice their Hindu religion. They still seem to practice some of the caste structural hierarchy that they experienced in India, and they've brought that with them to the West Indies. So this one gives you a little bit of information about the assimilation and integration, or lack thereof, of these people of Indian descent living in the Caribbean. The next book I wanted to mention is Golden Child by CaribAThon. And CaribAThon is also a Trinidadian author, in that she grew up in Trinidad, but she now lives in England. This is what CaribAThon looks like. And this one is also a little bit of a throwback, in that while this is a new release, it was only published about 2 years ago. The setting is sometime in the past. The storyline in this one follows a nuclear family, a father and mother and their 2 sons. They are twins who are almost identical in their appearance, but very different in their abilities, in that one of the boys is gifted and the other is a little bit slower. One of the boys disappears, and the family needs to decide what they will do, what they will give up in order to get their son back home. This one speaks a lot about education, but not just the education of the individual, what this could mean for the family. So if a child who grows up in poverty becomes educated and is able to make something of themselves, what it could mean for the family around him. So the golden child in this one is the person that you expect to rescue the family from poverty because of the sacrifices that the parents and the other family members have made in order to get this person to a place of success. This one speaks a lot about that expectation of people who are of reduced circumstances, people who are in poverty, and expect to give everything that they have to their children, so that their children will do better than they did and will be able to take care of them and the other family members in the future. That is such an expectation of people who are living in poorer countries, and it is done very well in this story, in that the author explores that need, that desire, but also that limitation. If the family sacrifices everything to send one of their children to school, what does that mean for the other family members? So this is a very interesting story because of what it shows of the tendencies of families to do this, but also what it shows of the limitations that the family or that the other family members would experience. The next book I wanted to mention is Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. And if you're not familiar with this author or her writings, I must let you know that despite what her name might suggest, she's not from Jamaica. She's actually from Antigua. And she assumed this name when she moved to the United States because she had a different identity living in the United States as an immigrant as opposed to the way she grew up. Annie John is a short story, and if you are new to reading books by Caribbean authors, this is a really good one to give you a little bit of insight into what it was like growing up in rural Caribbean countries, and some of the experiences that a child would have as a student, some of the experiences that a child would just have growing up in a community with the expectation that their family and their wider community might have for them. Annie John in this one is the name of our main character. She's a little girl, but it's also the name that she shares with her mother. And so in this one, while we feel like we're reading about this young girl, we could almost just as easily be reading the story of her mother. And so it shows the parallels between child and parent and some of the expectations that parents have. One, that their children will continue their legacy, but also almost conversely, that their children will have very different lives from them. Different meaning better. So this one shows you a little bit of the dichotomy of experiences and expectations, and it also shows how resentment can build when children feel like their parents are unfairly giving them or putting unfair expectations onto their lives. This is a really interesting read, and like I said, it's a really short book. This one is only 145 pages and wide margins, very readable, very good way to get into Caribbean literature. If you have not read anything by a Caribbean author before, Jamaica Kincaid is a really good place to start. And so these are a few books by Caribbean authors that I have read and enjoyed and wanted to recommend to you as you start thinking about books that you might want to read as well in June to celebrate Caribbean Heritage Month. I'd love to chat with you in the comments down below. If you've read any of these and want to have a chat with me about them, a little bit deeper discussion, or if you have books that you have read by Caribbean authors that maybe you want to suggest to me, or you want to ask me a question. I'd love to engage with you in the comments down below. I've also put some links in the description box down below where you can support this channel by making a purchase or clicking my affiliate links or my wish list, or however you'd like to support this channel. Also, give me a thumbs up and let's chat in the comments. So until next time, until we come back for another video, happy reading. Bye.